You know, back when I was 19 years old, I was given the best piece of advice that I've ever received. I was told, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. Let's talk about that. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today, I'm joined by Randy Wilson. Randy is on a mission to ignite lasting personal and financial transformation in individuals worldwide through the Rich Mind podcast. Mentored by personal development and financial education giants like Jim Rohn, Earl Nightingale, Earl is an absolute favorite of mine, David Neagle, Bob Proctor, and Robert Kiyosaki, Randy combines his passion for personal growth with practical financial education to encourage his followers to take inspired action to achieve their dreams. With over 200 episodes and a global audience, the Rich Mind podcast has become a leading resource for those seeking to apply timeless wisdom and build a richer, more fulfilling life. Randy's engaging style and insightful approach inspire listeners to take action, develop themselves, and build their own path to financial freedom and personal success. Welcome, Randy. So great to have you on, man.
Daryl, super excited to be here, man. It's we were talking about before we hit record. I'm usually on the opposite side of the mic, meaning I'm usually the one doing the interviews. So to be interviewed is going to be a little bit of a different experience for me. I've done it a few times, not a ton, but at the same time, super excited to be on the podcast. Appreciate the invitation. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to add a ton of value to your listeners.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, I believe so, for sure. When I was on your podcast, actually twice, and I appreciate you allowing me to do that. But we definitely we're aligned in terms of how we think and sort of values and what we deem important in our lives and with relationships and families and whatever it is, just how we choose to show up on this life or in this life. And my belief, and I think yours is too, which is the reason we do these podcasts, is it's all about our stories. It's all about where we were, what happened, where we are now, and what we'd like to do going forward. And I guess with that in mind, I'd love to if you'd be so kind as to share your story. What brings you here, what brought you to the Rich Mind podcast, what brought you to the co-authoring your book, Think Big. It'd be great to hear your story.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I'll try to keep it relatively short, right? If I go a little long, don't hesitate to ask questions or anything like that. Or if I don't elaborate enough, don't hesitate to help me with that as well. But as you mentioned, when I first was introduced to you, it's like our stories kind of intertwined, meaning from the Midwest, kind of a little bit of a lost upbringing, kind of chasing things that I didn't know exactly why I was doing certain things, really some misguided beliefs. I had a loving family. My mom and my dad were great. My dad was challenging, meaning sports was kind of the biggest thing that I did growing up. Basketball, baseball, that's another part of your story that resonated with mine. So I always wanted to play collegiately, and my goal was to become a professional of some kind. I didn't care where. I just wanted to get paid to play basketball. So for you to play in college, that was always super cool as far as part of your story as well. But I didn't make it that far, but I did play in high school. But my dad was he was never physically abusive, never, but he was always challenging and mentally abusive, meaning that it didn't matter. Let's just use maybe baseball as a better example, right? Whether I struck out or I missed a fly ball or basic mistake, my dad would just basically give me the cold shoulder. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, he would stop talking to me versus yelling at me. He would just give me the cold shoulder to the point where I would second guess every move that I made, whether it was on the sports field, definitely in school. I was never really great in school. I was always just there to kind of get the grades enough to keep playing the sport, right? The C average was at best. And, I just did the best that I possibly could. So with that said, I idolized my father. I did everything I could to try to get for him to admire or for him to like and appreciate me. It's like I never could do enough, which made me work harder and harder and harder to try to get him to One thing I've told my wife this before, he never, to my knowledge that I can remember, he never told me he was proud of me, ever. And that still to this day sticks with me. But that's what I was striving to get him to do. So with that said, fast forward into my adult life, same thing with my working career. Whatever he felt like I should do, I did. And the mentality that I had growing up was just work hard, grind, head down, just work until you couldn't work anymore, basically. And luckily for me, I picked an industry where working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week was exactly what they expected you to do, was in retail. I was in retail grocery store chain here in the Midwest. It was a regional grocery store chain. And I started there when I was 16. And I finally left when I was probably about 36 or 37. So I had 20 years in with this company. But from 16 till 35, let's say, I just grinded. I worked and worked and worked because that's what I thought that I should do. Trying to move up the ladder of success, quote unquote success, trying to get that title. I earned that title as far as a store manager in what was considered an early age. I think I was right at 30 when I first got my experience of managing the store. And you're literally responsible front to back, right? It doesn't matter if the lights go out or the power goes out or refrigeration goes down, somebody calls in, it didn't matter. So I was literally working 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I just did it. So I had a young family at home and I was neglecting them, meaning once again, I wasn't physically bad to them. At least I don't think that I was. But at the same time, I just wasn't home. I was disconnected from them a lot, most of the time, until finally I got my wake up call. So at this grocery chain, so this was back in 2007, 2008. So it's very similar to what we're experiencing now with the economy and all the disruptions and all that kind of stuff. So right around that 07, 08 timeframe, the company I was working for went through some hardship. And they started to close stores. They eventually filed for bankruptcy. Don't need to go into all that detail, but what happened was my supervisor, as I mentioned, I was a store manager at the time, came in very first thing in the morning on I think it was a random day. I think it was like a Wednesday morning. He never, ever came in early. He was always visiting me late in the day because he always told me that it was a great day, a great place to wrap up his day, right? We always had a great relationship. Friends, friendly. I mean, it's not like we went hung out or anything like that, but we were definitely friendly and friends with each other in a work environment. So for him to show up first thing in the morning, it was like a red flag. I was like, uh-oh, what did I just do? Mm-hmm. Or what happened? And I went to him, obviously I went up to him, said, hey, sir, what's going on? Good to see you. I was wrapping up my morning routine, which, in the morning, if anybody's ever worked retail, I just touch base with all my departments, make sure everything was functioning properly, everything was working per se. He says, Randy, it's good to see you. We definitely have to have a conversation. We just need to have a conversation. So just wrap up with what you're doing. And just meet me in your office when you get done. And my lap around the store that time was just like, it was nerve wracking. I was thinking, I'm going to get canned. I didn't know what I did. So that's where my mind went. It's like, what am I doing? What did I do? So I finally went into the office and, I opened the door and he was standing right at the doorway there. And I went to go sit in my chair and he slammed this huge, heavy door. And it just made the loudest bang noise. It scared the life out of me. Anyways, I sat down and in that moment he shared with me, Randy, the company's going through some turmoil and I knew that, right? I knew from a big picture, I knew that. But the decision that they made was that they were going to close my store. And that was my wake up call. I had given that store. Like I said, it's your life. It's what you do. It's you eat, live, you sleep, you breathe, your retail store, right? Even the people within. So I did everything I could to try to make that little store profitable. And I just couldn't get it done through these beliefs of the hard work and the grind and just, all that. And so I used up a lot of my energy, used up a lot of my relationship with my family to try to accomplish this thing that they ended up shutting it down. I realized in that moment that I was just a number. I was just there to fill a spot, to, obviously just do whatever they wanted me to do in those moments. That all that hard work leading up till that moment it's not that it didn't go unnoticed because my supervisor, as I mentioned, he was great. He loved me as far as like he appreciated what I did. But at the end of the day, when the push comes to shove and they were just about the numbers, I was on the chopping block just like everybody else. And so in that moment, as I mentioned, I just started to question everything. Why in the world am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? Why is my family putting up with this? And I didn't have an answer because I was just living the script that I thought, the stories and the beliefs that I'd been led up to that point. I was just following the script. My dad always told me, just work hard, stay with the same company for 20, 30, 40, whatever many years. You'll get a retirement, you'll get the fancy watch, you'll have the 401k, just all the same basic stuff that I hear even still being taught to this day. And I started to question it. So the only thing I could think of to do at that moment was search for answers. I had to find out, because obviously the people I was getting information from wasn't working. So the only thing I could think of to do is I went to the local library, which, if you know me, as I mentioned, in my school days, I was terrible in school. So reading was not my thing, but I couldn't think of anything else to do. So it was 07, 08. The iPhone was brand new back then. I mean, the way, we almost take for granted the podcast, the information that's being easily shared these days. But back then it wasn't, or at least it wasn't the way it is today. Anyways, I went to the library. And the only thing I could think of to do was to go to the personal finance section, because I had to figure out how to get myself out of the mess that I've gotten myself in. I was broker than broke. I was working 60, 70 hours a week, a young family. My oldest was probably 10 at the time. My youngest was probably 7 at the time. You talking about paycheck to paycheck. Just the whole standard of living that was just awful. And so I went to the personal finance section of the library, and the book, and it's actually up here on my shelf if you're watching me on video, is the book Retire Rich, Retire Young by Robert Kiyosaki jumped off the shelf at me. And it was mainly because of the Retire Rich. It was like, retire rich. Yeah, that's what I need to figure out. It's like, so that's what I thought. So I grabbed that book. I ran home. I started to devour that book. As I mentioned, I'm not a reader by any means, but I was learning and reading things that I had never heard before. Businesses, balance sheets, income statements, good debt, bad debt, things that like I said, I wasn't exposed to any of this growing up. And so I started to once again question everything. Within that book, though, he also mentioned a big part of his driver was personal development. So he mentioned Earl Nightingale's Lead the Field. So once again, I have Earl Nightingale's Lead the Field up on my shelf as well. That's the first time I'd ever heard of that. So I was never exposed to any financial education. I was never exposed to any personal development my entire life up until about 35. And it was self-discovery. I had to discover it on my own, which then led me down this quick trail as fast as I possibly could of consuming as much as I possibly could. I was devouring content, as you mentioned, Earl Nightingale, Jim Rohn, Proctor, Robert Kiyosaki, as I mentioned, with the financial education. Anything I could get my hands on, I was trying to consume it as much as I possibly could. So I'll try to fast forward here. I know this is probably getting a little long-winded. So then what I did is, I started to get some positive experience in my life, right? I started to create some positive change in my life just with the understanding new concepts and new ideas, which made me actually a little frustrated with my dad. As I mentioned, I idolized that man. I was mad. I was like, why isn't he teaching me these things? I thought he was keeping it from me. I was so mad that one day. So what happened, or through this process, as I was sharing things with him, he was learning as I was learning, right? He didn't really understand these things either. And that was the light bulb moment. That's what really allowed me then to kind of let go of that frustration with my father, was thinking that he was keeping it from me, was that he didn't know either. So he didn't know to teach me, so that's why I'm on a mission today, is that through the Rich Mind podcast, through the experiences that I've had, through the interviews that I've done, as you mentioned, you've been on the podcast and sharing stories. I'm on a mission to change that as much as I possibly can from here in Indianapolis, Indiana, trying to spread my message as far and as wide as I possibly can to get people to understand that the reality they might be living might be because of they're just not looking at it through the right lens. They might not comprehend, or they might not understand certain things in a certain way. And with a simple shift in mindset, with a simple shift of some understanding of some financial education, basic things, their life can completely be different in a relatively short period of time. And the reason why I know that is because that's what's happened for me. And so, yeah, just super excited to share as much as I possibly can. And I just love it. I still learn every single day. And so that's what I try to do. I try to take and use myself as the almost like a guinea pig. So I try to learn, and then I just try to share what I've learned within my own life. And hence the Rich Mind podcast was born almost 2 years ago. And I just, I love every single minute of it. So hopefully that was okay, Daryl. Pick and poke at that, any part of that story. And then, I love it. So I appreciate you letting me share.
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. Very cool, man. So many things that are so similar, about us. Our stories are different, but I always felt like when I was a kid, my dad was a mechanic, and I remember him getting, I think it was 25 years in. He spent 41 years, I think, at General Motors as a mechanic, but 25 years, they gave him a clock. I'm like, why don't they give him a Cadillac? You know what I mean? Like, let's do something like that, and I didn't think about it back then, but I heard people say things like, as I started, driving my own bus in terms of just trying to be successful and learn about this life. I heard people say, why work 40 years for a $40 watch, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's true. But several things you touched on, which I think are terribly interesting. We can dive into any piece of it, but there's the component of, the expectations that are placed on us as kids. And I had expectations placed on me, certainly, that I didn't live up to. And I tried to live up to. And then, my sort of stopping point was I got sober. And then I tried to really, double time live up to what I thought. It was mostly my mom as opposed to my dad, but what was going to make her proud of me. And my mantra was, for a long time, was I want my parents to be proud of me, in terms of what I do with this life. Nobody in my family had graduated from college, and, I ended up going to college, but my mom, when I was a kid, she'd be like, you're either a pastor or a doctor. I'm like, well, if I don't go to college, doctor's kind of out. I'm not a huge fan of pastor necessarily. Because just my relationship with religion was always tenuous when I was a kid. So the other thing I think, which is huge, is you talked about, hitting a bottom. You hit a bottom, and then you had to, teach yourself how to rise from that bottom. And there's just a lot of fruit in there that we can talk about. But I think the biggest thing that hits me about changing one's life is, when am I ready to take responsibility for everything in my life, and, what I'm responsible for, my family and my finances and all that stuff, right? I mean, that's the important stuff. What am I going to be responsible for, and what am I going to make happen?
100%. So it was, as I was getting that wake up call, it took a while. So, obviously with that story, it feels like it was a really relatively short period of time. I'm still literally working on it to this day. So we're talking 15 years later, I'm still trying to improve all of that within myself. I'm getting better. I feel like I'm getting better. So we joke around in my house, right, with my wife, is that, I had a pre-personal development life, and then I've had a post-personal development life, and it's ever evolving, right? I'm getting better at things all of the time. But as you said, the resentment, the past beliefs and the stories that I was basically operating under on autopilot, right? It took a long time for a lot of those to start being chiseled away, for me to understand and realize that I was creating my own reality. It wasn't necessarily things out there. One thing I say on my podcast a lot is I talk about winning within. And I didn't really, and it almost sounds religious. And as you mentioned, I'm not a really religious person either, but I just love the concept of, and the idea that I've had to focus on me. I've had to focus on my internal dialogue, how I feel, my emotions. As I mentioned, even today before we hit record, my palms are sweating right now a little bit because I'm a little bit nervous. A few years ago, prior to personal development, I wouldn't even have thought anything about it, or else it would have thrown me into a negative tailspin where who knows what the conversation would be having right now. But the point is that as I've worked on me, as I've worked on my the battles, right? When I stopped fighting myself, just like with your title of your podcast, when I stopped fighting within, my exterior environment started to get better. My relationship with my wife got better. I've got an exponentially better relationship with my children. I'm able to host and bring folks on. Perfect stranger. I mean, just like you, Daryl, meeting you, you're a stranger to me 6 months ago, but to be able to bring you into my life, have a conversation, feel like we're building a relationship. Once again, pre-personal development, no chance. Post-personal development, obviously I'm able to get better at that. So the crafting or the craft of podcasting has allowed me then to keep stretching myself from within, challenging myself, understanding that it's me. I'm creating my reality. I can decide whether, challenging stories. So that's what I try to do with them myself. I try to challenge the stories, the beliefs that I've got. I try to find conflicting ideas back and forth. I try to kind of put them up against each other and see if I can't hold them in the same spot in my own mind or in my own thinking. And that kind of gets me or helps me then realize whether something's true or not. That's been my experience as I lived for so long living and thinking of beliefs and truths that I thought were concrete or that I thought were certain. And it took me a while to realize that no, it's not. And the beauty of it is that I have the ability to fix it, or I have the ability to work on it every single day. And I've taken responsibility, like you said, for my finances, with my businesses, with my podcasts, with my family, with my interactions, with my community, you name it. I try to do my best to take 100% responsibility and don't blame anybody for anything other than just me showing up. And so with that, yes, it, as you know, just even saying it, right? You take responsibility, right? So there's some burden on there with that, but at the same time, it allows me to be in the driver's seat of my life versus being a spectator. And for me, it's been a lot more fun. I've gotten to know a lot more people, experience a lot more things. And yeah, it's just been a great experience up to this point, which makes me excited, right? For the future. So many more things are coming and I'm just excited about them a little bit more every single day.
It's freedom, isn't it? That's how I look at responsibility. It's fascinating because you wouldn't think that when somebody mentioned responsibility to me, right after I got sober, they're like, "Oh, it's responsibility." I'm like, no, why? I wanted to be sober. I wanted to get better. I just didn't understand. I didn't understand. But since that time, I've discovered that freedom lies in the responsibility that I take with everything having to do with my life. And like you said, not blaming. And, we can have all these fingers in the past and like, oh, it's their fault or oh, they should have done this or that. And it's like, when I have those tethers hanging off of me that are tying me to the past, I'm not free.
Right.
And when I can, cut those tethers off or set them aside or think of things differently, have a different perspective. I mean, that to me is freedom. And that's the most wonderful feeling I think I've had in my life.
Same here. So just being trapped, unfortunately, right? I'm seeing even folks in my close proximity right now with the companies that they're working for. And, they haven't necessarily taken my advice, and it's not like I'm out there passing it out, but at the same time, I'm very vocal with the taking control, taking responsibility, working on your personal development, working on your financial education, get your things in order, right? Because you never know what could happen. And I'm seeing that happening literally in real time. I just had a friend, looks like they listed their house for sale. Now, I don't know the details. I don't know their personal life, but I know that the company he was working for was going through some turmoil like we were 10, 15 years ago. So I have a gut feeling that he's probably having some challenges within his own life. That's unfortunate because once again, it's like once you take responsibility, yes, there's some added pressure when it comes with that responsibility. But like you said, it's freedom. It's your ability then to choose. David Nagel, you mentioned him being a huge mentor of mine, and I would recommend anybody go out there and find David. You can find him on the Successful Mind podcast. But he talks about our greatest gift is our ability to choose. And so for the first 35 years of my life, I didn't take that responsibility. I didn't take that ability. I was waiting for somebody to tell me what to do. And I was good at doing it. Like, you give me marching orders and I can go get it done. And I'm still that way today. But instead, I've tried to flip it and I've tried to take responsibility, take it in-house, be responsible for my thoughts, be responsible for my actions. I talk about on within my podcast a lot that I'll get triggered by an outside event, whether it's something on social media, just anything, right? Something my wife says, whatever. I call them triggers. And before, well, so once again, pre versus post, I would get and be sent down a rabbit hole that would take me in a negative spiraling space that I didn't ever feel like I could ever get out of. That since then, since I've taken this responsibility back in, I can almost see the trigger happening in real time. And so I'm able to then to analyze it, think about it, contemplate on it. Is it true? Where's it coming from? Was this a past belief? I mean, I just run down a series of questions. It's in my mind. Nobody even knows that I'm doing it. But what it's allowed me to do is shorten that negativity time frame for myself. I used to go depression, just negativity for weeks or months at a time. I mean, it was bad, to where I'm able to now get myself back to where I feel like I'm in control within a few minutes, or definitely probably within an hour or two. And that exercise of just taking the responsibility and taking that in-house has completely changed my life. It's completely changed my family's life. It's changed the way the Wilsons will show up moving forward. I have a grandson now. He's 17 months old. And how I'm able to show up for him today is completely different than how I used to be. And because of that, I know he's going to be different, or hopefully better, right? You never know. But I know he's going to leave and have a better life, at least an experience when he's in my proximity, right? Because I'm able to be a better person because of that work that I've done and trying to win within. That's really where my focus is.
Isn't that the coolest thing in the world, though? Truly, like, and I believe this, I don't mean this to sound cold, but, every day I'm putting a product out into the world. The product is me. What kind of a product am I putting out there? Am I helpful to other people? Am I able to forget about what I need and, maybe offer that smile to somebody on the sidewalk? Or, I don't do too much of this anymore because the world is what it is, but, stop and help somebody change a flat tire, or, just things like that. Can I
Just
get out
holding a
of
door for
myself?
somebody?
What's
Yeah.
that?
Holding a door for somebody as they're entering,
Exactly.
just
Yes.
basic stuff. Yeah.
Basic
I know what you
stuff.
mean.
Right. And it starts with being in a position to forget about me, forget about what bothers me, forget about what upsets me, because we can get so caught up in that. And there was a gentleman, he was actually a pastor, but he was a sober guy. And, I come from a life of getting sober and, recovery and that sort of thing. But he was a pastor at this church called Unity Church. And, he'd been sober for a long time. And he said, and relating to what you just mentioned about that story of, a trigger comes in, what do I do? And one of the things that he said, which I didn't think was going to work, but it really does, is when I get, into a reel that I'm not happy with. I'm thinking about, oh, somebody did this, and I think about it, and I have conversations in my mind with them and this and that, which doesn't happen that often anymore, but sometimes it'll come up. And what I can say to that is, when it pops up, cancel. And it's amazing that many times I might have to do it twice, but it goes away. And it's me allowing myself to stop that reel, and then taking the time to change my perspective on, nobody was trying to hurt me. Nobody was trying to piss me off. Nobody was trying to, whatever it is. It just happened, and it's up to me to deal with it. So I've loved everything you've talked about, Randy, and it's interesting because there's so many similarities, with my story. But is there a recipe of things that you would, that you do, or that you'd recommend that people do to sort of, just begin that within sort of look?
Yeah, of course. And I appreciate you asking. The one thing I talk about a lot, and this is going to sound, once again, it's just basic things. So Jim Rohn, love Jim Rohn. If you don't follow or haven't gotten into Jim Rohn's content, please do that as well. He absolutely changed my life. But what he talks about, or what he was teaching me when I was learning for myself, is the basics. You've got to get good at the basics. You can't expect big success in your life if you're not good at the basics. So one of the basics that I've implemented into my life, and this is just, it's something that It's going to sound super simple. I talk about it on my podcast all the time. Journaling. Journaling is a process for myself that, once again, getting in the habit of doing it. And I do it every morning. Every morning, meaning I might miss maybe 2 weeks out of the entire year, total of maybe 14 days total that I might miss just because of circumstances going on. But so for the majority of my days, every morning, I journal. I've got just a plain line notebook. And what it does is it allows me then to get my thoughts out of my own mind. So I usually refer back to the previous day. I'll just kind of jot down what happened, whether it was good, whether it was bad. Sometimes it's bad days, right? Sometimes it's good experience. Sometimes it's bad, but it allows me then to get it out of my mind. So that way I can start to be aware of it. Like you mentioned, that whole idea about cancel. To me, that just it's a trigger to bring awareness to it, right? Because when you're aware, then you can make a different response, or you can, respond to it differently. And when you do that, then you can take a different action. And then obviously that's going to affect your results. But journaling has probably been one of the most impactful things that a routine that I've put in my mind, or put for myself, probably in the last 4 or 5 years. That's really probably changed the trajectory of me. So it's allowed me then to get clear on some ideas. So brainstorming comes out of that. I actually was journaling today. And so I'm going to be recording my next episode tomorrow. And through my journaling exercise, I've got an idea that I want to discuss. Anyways, the point is that it gets my mind thinking actively, passionately about me, versus worrying about all the stuff that's going on out there in the world. Now, I'm not saying close your eyes and bury your head in the sand and forget about it and it's not happening. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that turning it off, turning it down, getting quiet as much as you possibly can. I mentioned before we hit record here today, I had a guided meditation that I was listening to that was just getting my mind prepared to have this conversation today. I wanted to show up with a ton of energy, obviously share my message as much as in the best way that I possibly could. So getting quiet, journaling would probably be the two biggest things for myself. I don't watch a lot of television, and I don't listen to a lot of radio. And I try to use those as learning times, right? I'm trying to figure out how can I keep improving, listening to great podcasts like this one, like yours, Daryl, as much as I possibly can, learning from other people's stories. How can I implement those ideas into my life? And then I go to work and make it real as best that I possibly can based on the experiences that I've got going on at those particular times. So it's the basics. My son, he's 27. I think he's about ready to be 28. That's all I'm ever telling him. Son, focus on the basics. So much so I'm like, how you doing, Riley? He's like, I'm just working on the basics, Dad. I'm just working on the basics. And it's because that's what I firmly believe, that until you get good at the basics, you can't expect large quantities of greatness to just all of a sudden appear in your life. If you can't get up and make your bed in the morning, or put on a clean pair of clothes, get a shower. Just basic things, basic stuff. You can't expect great things to happen. And that's what I've taught myself. And that's kind of what I live by. So yeah, curious what your thoughts are.
No, I love it. I really do. I've been fortunate to, teach sales and teach business and help people with risk management and that sort of thing in my career. And I always tell them, like, look, if you're struggling or if you find yourself confused or whatever, you just go back to the basics. You just go back to the blocking and tackling and do the stuff that you may have set aside, which put you in this position, put you in a position where you become confused and you're not sure which direction to go. And journaling is huge. And I'm not a daily journal person, but I did that, years ago when I was feeling like overwhelmed and, oh man, I just all this stuff's in my head and it's flying around and just these reels going and going. And what am I going to do next? How am I going to get through this? Et cetera, et cetera. And I just wrote. I'd grab a yellow legal pad and I would just slam down as much stuff that was inside of me as I could and just got it out. And like you said, it provides clarity. It provides being able to see what's actually going on. And sometimes it was like, oh, well, that's no big deal. It's just swirling mess in my mind. It's not necessarily, earth shattering or life shattering stuff. And then the other thing you mentioned, which is, you have to go do from that point. You have to take action. You have to do things differently. Once you get the information from that writing or that journaling, it's funny because I don't know what shoulder it is. I guess it's this shoulder. Behind me on the top shelf, I put together journals, excuse me, for people. They're just blank journals, but one of them is rewrite your life story. And that's just what it says on the cover, just kind of a reminder. Another one is stop stopping yourself. What is the third one? Hold on. Stop fighting, start living. So those journals, I just make them available on my website because the value of writing is so crucial. And I'm so glad you brought that up. The other part, from the quiet perspective, I do my stuff every day. I have my daily habit or discipline or whatever you want to call it. And basically is I do breath work, which settles me. I do meditation, which, I'm settled by the breath work. And then the meditation is even that much more profound. I practice gratitude. I thank whatever it is that's larger than me. Anybody can call it whatever they want. You can call it the universe. You can call it HP. It doesn't matter what you call it. But I'm thankful. I'm thankful for my life. I'm thankful for the people in my life. And I exercise and I eat right. Those are the things that I choose to do. But quiet, which you mentioned, finding that quiet place allows me to approach life in a clear way. That's what I have found it does for me. So thank you for bringing those things up, Randy. It's powerful, absolutely powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So hopefully, somebody will take us up on those ideas, right? And just start to implement those basic things. And with that, who knows where a few months, few years could lead. And that's the best part, especially with the journaling for myself is, I've got multiple years worth of journaling that I refer back to it. And it's like you said, it's like, wow, did I really think that was a big deal back then? Or, you know what I mean? It's like, you realize you can actually see your growth in real time, which is super exciting. I know at some point, somebody, my family, who knows how long from now, assuming I'm not here anymore, we'll have that, right? To refer back to what's this Randy Wilson guy all about? So with the podcast and with my journaling, it's therapeutic for me, but then I'm also excited that somebody's going to have that, right? Almost as a record of what was going on at those particular times in my life.
I think that's really cool. I think that's really cool. I think there's a trail we can leave. I'll just relate a quick story. So I was involved as a shareholder in this company, and I was a working shareholder. So it was I was the second largest shareholder, and the largest shareholder. He and I were talking one day. I was in his office, and he said, "Daryl, this company is going to be a big part of your legacy." And my stomach immediately soured. I was like, I don't want a company to be a big part of my legacy. I really don't. I don't care if anybody knows if I was ever with this company or whatever. What I want to be my legacy is the product that I put out there in the world every day. It's the me. It's not, anything that I did financially or, whatever. I mean, and I've worked very hard to have some success in my life, and I appreciate it and I'm grateful for it and all those sorts of things. But I want my legacy, like you're saying, your journals or the, co-authoring the book or the Rich Mind podcast, that's a trail that somebody can follow to find potentially a better life for themselves. Right. And that's what we want to leave. I don't believe that leaving money to someone does them any good. I believe leaving them potentially a way to live that offers them contentment and fulfillment and waking up every day with a smile on their face, right? Like that's what matters.
Very much so. I mean, it's like you're the whole time you're saying all that. I'm like, yes, 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 100%. So wisdom, right? Knowledge, wisdom is what I'm trying to always gain. I'm always asking my family, right, or even anybody who I'm with, right? Share some wisdom with me. I'm always looking for wisdom. Share some wisdom. And it's funny, it's kind of become a joke, but that's kind of how I feel like it is with me right now. I feel like I've gotten myself down far enough, even though I've got plenty of road to go, that I can kind of, lead a hand back, right? As far as like share what I've learned, share what's worked for me, because I'm completely the guinea pig. Like it's like I didn't start with anything, no money, broker than broke,
Right.
a negative attitude, family we were intact. It's not like we were on the verge of divorce or anything like that. But as for I was disconnected, poor friends, I mean, you name it, negatively. Back then, I was there. So to have gotten myself to where I am today through the hard work, through the effort, through the journaling, through studying and focusing on the basics, listening to the greats, the Earl Nightingales, the Jim Rohns, you name it, right? So it's just an ever evolving process of building and trying to be better within for myself, but then giving back as much as I can as well. So I say this all the time, even, right? So now that I've gotten my grandson, it's like I feel like I'm doing it for him, right? But in reality, I'm doing it for even beyond him. I'm doing it for, generationally, right? I think back, so my grandfather, he died when he was in his mid 90s, but he was older when I was in that teenage years, meaning I think he had my dad when he was in his 40s or 50s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he was older. So anyways, there was just a disconnect, right? Just a disconnect from generationally. So I didn't ever had that chance to really ask him a lot of the things. He was born in 1906. Can you imagine having a conversation with somebody and there might be someone listening to us, they might have the ability to do that. My point being is that I wish that I would have had some record from him, what life was like, what he was like, what the Wilsons were like. Why do we think certain ways? Why do we believe certain ways? Why have we always done it? Whatever, you put on it whatever you like. But so that's why I'm doing what I do, is I'm trying to like you said, create a record for the Wilsons moving forward, that, hopefully at least they'll be able to in the future understand maybe a little bit better. I might not have all the answers because I'm not claiming that I do, but at least maybe challenge them to understand, or at least encourage them to understand that, yeah, it's okay. Whatever challenges you're dealing with, it's okay. Because like I said, if I can come through what I've come through to get to where I am today, anybody can. And that's it. I can't say it any more simpler than that. And so that's where I draw up my inspiration to just keep showing up as much as I possibly can, which is why I'm so excited to be on here with you today, Daryl.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, no, you're sharing such wonderful wisdom, and I'm a big fan of when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I used to, and this is going to age me a little bit, but I don't care because I'm old enough where it doesn't matter. But I used to throw in the cassette tapes and Brian Tracy and Deepak Chopra and Earl Nightingale and Napoleon Hill and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Zig Ziglar, right? Like all that stuff. I used
all
to
the
throw
greats.
those cassette tapes in the car. People are listening that are younger than us, like, what the hell are cassette tapes? Well,
take the pencil, stick it in the cassette tape to rewind it. Yeah, exactly. There
Wind
you go.
it up or whatever. And that was their trail for us to follow.
Right. 100%.
That was their, contribution to society and to the world. And when I could hear something 10 times and maybe not click with it. But when I hear it the 11th time, which is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, that little tidbit can change my life.
100%.
And so when we do that for others, to the extent we can, I think it's absolutely powerful. And I liken it to planting seeds. I liken it to, there's a picture that I've seen. I don't know if you call it a meme or whatever you call it, but it's a big stone, a rock, and it's giant. And there's a tree growing out of it and it's split in the middle. And that's the power of a seed. That's the power of planting a seed. And I think about that a lot, and I refer to that a lot because that's my purpose in life now. And I think it's your purpose in life, right? It's to leave those seeds for whomever and whenever they're ready to receive them.
100%. That was one of the wake up calls it took me. So as I was learning in my early stages, I was getting so excited. I was trying to share it with as many people as I possibly could, right? It's almost like, I couldn't stop like the excitement and sharing ideas and the knowledge and wisdom that I used to seek. But what I came into, or what I, found, was that, like you said, a lot of people weren't ready to hear the things I had to say. So I was getting a lot of pushback, and I still get pushback today. As I mentioned, I still have people in my close proximity that don't want to hear anything I have to say, so what I've learned, though, is that that's okay. All I can do is plant the seed. So once again, which is why, like you said, with the mission of the podcast and even with everything that I'm trying to do, is more of a just plant that seed. Somebody will hear the right thing at the right time, just like it was for me. Jim Rohn, he was gone a long, Earl Nightingale, same thing, right? Those guys have been gone for a long time, but they planted those seeds so long ago that they didn't know they were going to be impacting me. They had no idea. But had they not done that, you and I would be having this conversation today. That's kind of what keeps me going. I just don't want to stop. So prior to there, again, for me, prior to 35, I used to start and stop things all the time. But what I've decided to do even with the podcast is I'll pivot a lot. I use the word pivot. I've changed how I do it. A lot of the things, and those are the details we don't need to go into today, but I've pivoted a lot, but I just can't stop because I just never know when that seed, whatever seed that I'm planting that day, that episode that I release or whatever I'm doing, will be the one thing that somebody needs. And it's not about me. It's about trying to just give back and help them as much as I possibly can. Because yes, I've borrowed this knowledge and wisdom from them. It's not like I've come up with it myself. I mean, I've got some experience because I've put it into action, but I'm just trying to take it and then maybe put my spin on it based on my experiences that hopefully will resonate with people in a different way. Some people will hear me in my Midwestern accent talking about, Indiana and corn and, basketball or whatever. And they're going to tune out because I just don't resonate with them. And that's completely fine. There's people out there today that people will bring me, listen to this person, listen to that person, and I'll try. And it's like, I just don't get it. It doesn't resonate with me. And that's okay. Once again, it took me a little while to figure that out as well, because the right people that need my message, they'll find it, right? My goal is that it's for my family, but if it's people beyond my family, that's fantastic as well. And it just becomes fun. It's really a lot of fun. I encourage people all the time. You need to start a podcast because number one, you're going to be pushed. Personal growth is a lot. It's going to challenge you, and there's no mistakes. You can fumble. We fumbled a little bit here at the beginning, and I stumble over my words all the time, and it's not that big a deal. But it just, it becomes fun if you just enjoy the process. Once again, blocking and tackling, the basics. You can make it enjoyable, which is what I love to do.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think that's, I look at, mostly, there are times when, Daryl, you can do better, and I'll scrap it and I'll do better. But there are times when it's just feels very organic and real to allow, whatever to show up, just show up. We talked a little bit before recording that, I don't do much editing unless there's just a big disaster in there somewhere that I've got to get out of there. But outside of that, I want it to be organic. I want it to be real. I want it to be whatever fumbles there are, that sort of thing. So last sort of thought / question, which, my story where it was mentioned to me one time by a mentor of mine. And the reason why I titled my books the way I titled them, but my mentor, as I was wrestling with life, said, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And I've been carrying that, like a football for the rest of my life, just trying to figure out what exactly does that mean? Mm-hmm. And different levels of understanding show up over the course of time, which is quite cool. But what do you have a moment like that, or an enlightening sort of like, oh, light bulb, man, like one of those kinds of things where you're like, you know what, that really changed my life?
I do. So you didn't prep me with that question. So that's gonna
Sorry.
take me. No, that's good because that makes me think, right? Thinking on the fly. That's what we do on podcasts, and that's why I love it
Right.
so much. And yeah, so something quickly came to me. So let me see if I can articulate it well. So as I've mentioned Jim Rohn's name several dozen times already today, and you're going to hear his name a lot if you check us out on the Rich Mind podcast. But one thing Jim shared with me very early on, and so let me try to get the quote exactly right, or at least really close to it. But one thing he shared with me, and I used to listen to Challenge to Succeed. That was his audio program that he had there that I listened to over and over and over. So once again, folks, I recommend you grab a copy of Challenge to Succeed. But the quote, so let me think through it here real quick in my mind before I try to say it out loud. But he would say, in order to have more, you must first become more. And in order to become more, you must work harder on yourself than you do on your job.
Mm.
And I would sit with that. The first time I heard that, I'm like, what is that? I've never heard of such a thing. Work harder on myself than I do on my job. If I wanted to have more, I had to become more. And so I wrestled with that and sat with that. And so that probably has been the biggest quote for me because it forced me then to think once again. I go back to that winning within, that internal battle within myself. It made me realize that all my activity of doing, achieving, that, and I wasn't becoming who I wanted to be. My results were terrible. I had like I mentioned, I had the status of the store, but as far as my relationship with my family and the income that I had if you looked behind the scenes, it was a wreck. So I had to go to work and work on myself. Took me a little bit longer to realize it was, once again, those triggers, that internal dialogue, the things that we've kind of covered here today. But when I first heard that from Jim, that is by far probably the biggest quote that has changed my life and the trajectory of my life. And then obviously the Wilsons moving forward.
Very cool. Yeah, I love it, man. That's phenomenal. And it reminded me of I was told by a mentor many, many moons ago that he said, Daryl, first things first, and the rest will be added on.
Hmm.
And it's very similar to what you're talking about. And he explained it to me. He said, unless you're working on yourself, and that means body, mind, heart, and soul. That
Right.
means the entirety of you. If you're not putting that first, then you're going to reap the fruits of whatever you're putting first, and that, to the neglect of other things. And so first things first and the rest shall be added on means I need to, just exactly what you're saying. I need to become a better me and then present that product to whatever it is I'm working on. And, whether that's a job or a business or whatever it is. But yeah, beautiful stuff, man. I really appreciate you saying that. And those sort of light bulb enlightening moments, we carry those for the rest of our lives,
100%.
and the fact that popped up for you when I mentioned that is just, it's awesome. That's truly awesome. So how do we, the Rich Mind podcast, the Think Big book, how do we, align with Randy and check out Randy Wilson's stuff? What's the best way to do that?
Appreciate that, Daryl. Of course, it's so Randy Wilson Online on Instagram. A lot of times, if you just search for Randy Wilson Online, you'll find that in a lot of the different social media platforms. So Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm actually even on TikTok. If somebody wants to go down the TikTok rabbit trail, they can do that as well. YouTube is at Randy Wilson right now. You'll find the Rich Mind podcast there. The podcast, Rich Mind Podcast, can be found on all the podcast platforms. Releases right now, we're doing Tuesdays and Thursdays, so I invite you to come check us out. I've got 220 plus episodes, I think, as of this morning. We just released another episode. So yeah, plenty of content to binge on. If you find my message that resonates with you, feel free to obviously come on over and check it out. As I mentioned, on any podcast platform that you can imagine, including YouTube as well. You've mentioned a couple of times the Think Big book. And one thing, if you don't mind, I'd like to offer the audience a gift, if that's possible. Is that okay?
Please do. Yeah.
So I would be more than happy. I would love to send you a digital version of the Think Big book. So it's a compilation book, meaning I was a part of 30 plus entrepreneurs writing about their own stories. So you heard a little bit about my story here today. So I went into a little bit more detail within my chapter within the Think Big book. And I would love to send you a copy of that. If you want to send me an email at randy@richmind.co. That's randy@richmind.co. And just think big or something like that. Think Big book. Send me an email with that subject line. I can get you that digital copy over to you right away, or within obviously with as soon as I get that email. And yeah, would love to have you read my chapter, read the other chapters in the book. It's a bunch of fantastic humans, entrepreneurs, just out here trying to figure it out, as we all are, right? That's part of our stories, which is it's kind of been the theme of today's episode for sure with you, Daryl. So yeah, as I mentioned, Randy Wilson all over. You can head over to richmind.co and see all the different we've got blog posts, we've got different materials that you can find even beyond the episodes themselves. Yeah, feel free. There's plenty of places to dive in if that's something of interest. And yeah, I welcome anybody to come along the journey of personal development, right? Self-improvement, health, wealth, and legacy. That's kind of the three pillars that we try to focus on within the Rich Mind podcast. So once again, just appreciate your time and allowing me to come on and share my message. This has been a lot of fun. I think I need to get on and doing this side of the interviews a little bit more because I'm having a great time. I could just keep talking on and on and on. So hopefully it's been valuable for you, Daryl, and your audience as well.
Without a doubt, Randy. Yeah, without a doubt. I've loved the discussion we've had, and all of the things that Randy talked about in terms of ways to reach him, we will have on the in the show notes, so you can click on it. But don't wait. Shoot Randy that email now, and get
anytime.
that digital copy. So Randy, yeah, thanks, man. I do appreciate it immensely. I'm so happy that we had a chance to get you on, and I know we're going to be in touch and talking and take good care. We'll chat with you soon.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Daryl. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Randy. If you've enjoyed When I Stop Fighting the podcast, please check out my books and my journals on my website, daryldittmer.com. Enjoy a 15% discount by using the code PODCAST, DARYLDITTMER.com. Thanks again.